There comes a moment in life when something subtle but deeply unsettling begins to shift. The children you once held, guided and sacrificed for the ones whose scraped knees you bandaged and dreams you encouraged, now look at you differently. Maybe they roll their eyes at your advice. Maybe they dismiss your opinions. Maybe they talk down to you. Or worse, they make you feel like a burden and it stings. You gave them your best years. You poured love, wisdom, and energy into shaping their lives. So when the respect you once received begins to fade, it's natural to feel hurt, confused, maybe even angry. But here's the truth. Anger won't restore respect. Arguments won't heal the distance. And quietly suffering won't inspire change. There is a better way. In this video, we're going to talk about 6 powerful shifts you can make, not to beg for respect, but to reclaim it with quiet strength and dignity. These aren't about controlling your children or demanding their attention. They're about transforming how you see yourself and how they see you. Because when you stop chasing their approval, when you stand in your worth, set healthy boundaries, and rebuild your emotional independence, something amazing happens. They begin to notice, they begin to admire, and slowly they begin to respect you again. If your children have stopped treating you with the care and consideration you deserve, this message is for you. You're not powerless. You're not alone. And most importantly, you have the ability to rewrite the dynamic starting today. Let's walk through it together. Action 1. Stop chasing their approval. One of the most heartbreaking traps many aging parents fall into is the quiet, almost invisible pursuit of their children's approval. You might not even realize you're doing it. It shows up in the way you say yes when you mean no, the way you rearrange your day to accommodate their plans, the way you downplay your own needs, just hoping that your selflessness will earn back their warmth, their attention, their respect. But the painful truth is this: the more you chase their approval, the more invisible you become. Respect doesn't come from sacrifice alone. It comes from self-respect. And the moment you start bending over backward just to avoid tension or keep the peace, you silently teach them that your time, your opinions, and your boundaries are optional. Margaret, a vibrant woman in her 70s, once shared how she spent years tiptoeing around her adult children, canceling plans when they needed help, biting her tongue during conversations, pretending she was fine when she wasn't. All in the name of keeping the family close, but in doing so, she lost her voice. And eventually her children stopped listening altogether. It wasn't until Margaret reclaimed her space speaking her mind, setting healthy boundaries, saying not this time, that things began to shift. Her children didn't rebel, they paused. They noticed, and slowly they began to treat her with the respect she had forgotten. She was allowed to demand. If you feel unseen, overlooked, or undervalued, don't push harder to win their affection. Pull back. Reclaim your voice. Because when you stop proving your worth, you remind them that it was never up for negotiation in the first place. Action 2. Don't argue. Lead by example. Once you stop chasing their approval and begin reclaiming your own dignity, the next challenge emerges: the urge to defend yourself, to argue, to explain your worth to those who've started treating you like your voice doesn't matter. It's a natural reaction when someone talks over you or dismisses you. You want to speak louder, stand taller, remind them of everything you've done. But here's a hard truth: arguing doesn't restore respect. It drains it. You don't win respect by raising your voice. You earn it by raising your presence. When you engage in arguments, especially with your children, you unintentionally confirm their belief that they hold the power in the dynamic, that you are seeking something from them: approval, validation, attention. But when you stop defending yourself and instead begin to embody your wisdom, your calm, your authority, something shifts. Take Frank, for example, a retired school principal who spent decades commanding classrooms with grace and strength. But at home, his grown children rolled their eyes, interrupted him, and rarely took his thoughts seriously. At first, Frank pushed back. He argued. He reminded them, "I raised you." But the more he fought, the more they tuned him out. So Frank changed course. He stopped trying to prove anything. He stopped reacting. He simply showed up with quiet authority, listening more, choosing his words carefully, and never letting their dismissiveness shake his self-worth. Over time, his children started to notice, not because he fought harder, but because he carried himself like a man who didn't need to win because he already knew who he was. That's the power of leading by example, when your tone remains calm while theirs rises, when your actions stay grounded, while theirs grow reactive. They begin to see the difference, not immediately, but gradually. So the next time you're tempted to argue, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, am I trying to win or am I trying to lead? Because when you lead with dignity, you teach without saying a word. And respect, the real kind, starts to return, not through conflict, but through quiet strength. Action 3. Withdraw your emotional dependence. Once you stop chasing their approval and let your dignity speak louder than your defense, there's another layer that quietly reveals itself: your emotional dependence. It's the silent hope behind every phone call that goes unanswered, every text left unread, every holiday where the table feels smaller than it used to. And it's not weakness, it's love. It's years of pouring yourself out for others and wanting just once to feel that same weight of care returned. But here's the truth most parents hesitate to face when your self-worth is tied to your children's attention. You hand them silent control over your peace. The irony is, the more you emotionally lean on them, the more you wait for their calls, cling to their visits. Subtly remind them how much you miss them, the more they begin to pull away. Not because they don't love you, but because it feels heavy. Pressure-filled, like your well-being rests on their ability to make you feel needed. And the more they sense that weight, the less they want to carry it. Helen knew that weight. A devoted mother who gave everything to her children, she found herself in her 70s feeling invisible. She waited by the phone. She called too often. She reminded them how much she missed them. Her love was real, but so was the silence that followed. Until one day she stopped waiting. She stopped asking. Instead, she started living. She joined a walking group, took an art class, made brunch plans with friends. And the more she filled her own life, the more her children began to reappear, not out of guilt, but out of admiration. They began to respect her time again, to see her as a whole person, not a quiet ache, waiting on the other end of a call. When you stop needing your children to complete you emotionally, something powerful happens. You reclaim the center of your own story. You teach them that your joy isn't their job, it's your choice, and that more than anything earns their respect, because people value what stands strong on its own. Action Chapter 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. Once you begin to stand on your own emotionally, no longer seeking validation, no longer chasing connection, you'll notice a subtle shift. Not just within you, but in how others treat you. And this is where the next step becomes crucial. You must protect the space you've reclaimed. You do that by setting boundaries, and more importantly, by enforcing them. Love without limits becomes expectation. Generosity without pause becomes entitlement. And silence in the face of disrespect doesn't preserve peace. It erodes it. You can't control how others treat you, but you can absolutely control what you allow. When Helen stopped waiting by the phone and started filling her own life, something unexpected happened. Her children came back into the picture, but not always with grace. They still interrupted, still assumed, still expected her to drop everything as she always had. That's when she realized that independence means nothing without boundaries. Setting boundaries isn't about distance. It's about definition. It's about saying, this is how I will be treated, and this is where I draw the line. Robert, a retired business owner, had spent his entire career earning respect from employees and colleagues. But at home, his adult children spoke over him, disregarded his choices, even criticized his lifestyle. At first, he bit his tongue, thinking silence was strength. But every time he let it slide, he felt himself shrinking. So he made a shift. When his son interrupted him, he paused and said, "You can speak when I finish." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he calmly replied, "You don't have to agree, but I expect to be heard." And when the disrespect persisted, he drew a line. If they couldn't offer basic respect, they wouldn't get his time. The results weren't instant, but they were real. Over time, his children adjusted, not because he forced them, but because he showed them that his presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. Boundaries. Teach people how to treat you. They are the fence around your dignity, the guardrails of your self-respect. And when you enforce them with calm certainty, not anger, not shame, you stop being someone to manage and become someone to respect. Action 5. Stop giving without appreciation. After you've drawn the line, set your boundaries, and stood firm, there's another step that quietly reinforces your self-respect, reassessing what you give and to whom. Because giving is powerful, but only when it's valued. Giving without appreciation doesn't create deeper bonds. It creates silent resentment. For many parents, giving has always been second nature. You give your time, your energy, your finances, your patience. You drop what you're doing to answer the phone. You stretch your limits to help even when no one asked how you're doing. And perhaps at one point that giving felt rewarding. It came from a place of love. But over time, something shifts. Gratitude disappears. Requests become expectations. Help becomes habit. And one day you realize you're not giving out of love anymore. You're giving out of fear. Fear that if you stop, you'll be forgotten or, worse, replaced. But here's the truth. Giving without appreciation doesn't earn love. It erodes dignity. George learned this the hard way. A devoted father always first to offer a loan, a right of favor. He rearranged his life around his adult children's needs, yet rarely heard thank you. And when he needed help during a difficult time, no one showed up. That was his wake-up call, so he pulled back not out of anger, but out of wisdom. He stopped offering before being asked. He said no when it meant protecting his peace. And most importantly, he made it clear his support was not a guarantee. It was a gift. At first, his children were upset, confused by the change. But gradually, something unexpected happened. They began to check in more often, express gratitude, respect his time. Why? Because George stopped teaching them that his generosity was limitless. And that's the key. You're not withholding love. You're redefining the terms. When you give with discernment, you remind others that your time and effort are precious, not to be wasted or demanded. You teach them that your support is not owed, it's earned. This shift is powerful, because when your giving becomes intentional, it becomes valuable again, not just to them, but to you. Action 6. Build a life outside of them. Once you stop giving without appreciation, the next step is reclaiming your identity, not just as a parent, but as a whole person. Because here's the truth. If your entire world revolves around your children, they may stop seeing you as someone to respect and start seeing you as someone who's simply waiting around. There is nothing more powerful, nothing more quietly commanding than a parent who lives with purpose outside of their children's orbit. When your life is filled with meaning, when your days have rhythm beyond their schedules, when your joy doesn't hinge on their calls or visits, something incredible happens. They stop seeing you as dependent, and they start seeing you as dignified. Take Eleanor, for example, a widow in her late 70s. She once filled every empty space with her children. She called often, offered advice constantly, and expected her kids to fill the emotional void her husband once occupied. But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them further away. They felt smothered, not maliciously, but naturally, because Eleanor had become a woman without her own world. Then slowly she changed. She joined a book club. She took morning walks with a neighbor. She even traveled with a church group for the first time in years. And something shifted, not just in her, but in her children. They began to admire her again. They called more, asked her opinion. Made time not out of guilt, but out of curiosity and respect. Why? Because people are drawn to lives that feel full. Your children should add to your happiness, not be your happiness. When you show them that your world is rich, vibrant, and meaningful, you invite them to engage with someone they're proud of, not responsible for. The most lasting kind of respect doesn't come from what you give them. It comes from what you build for yourself. So build something beautiful. There comes a moment in every parent's journey when the lines begin to blur, when the children you once held in your arms start seeing you differently, sometimes with less patience, less attentiveness, and yes, even less respect. And that shift can cut deep. But what today has shown us is that you're not powerless in the face of that change. In fact, you hold the key. Respect isn't something you plead for. It's something you awaken in others by how you live, how you lead, and how you love without losing yourself in the process. When you stop chasing their approval, you begin rediscovering your own worth. When you lead with quiet confidence instead of argument, your dignity speaks louder than any demand. When you release your emotional dependence, you free them and yourself to love from a healthier place. When you enforce your boundaries, you teach them how to treat you. When you stop giving without appreciation, you remind them your time and love are treasures, not transactions. And when you build a life outside of them, you don't drift away. You rise. You show them what it looks like to grow even now, to evolve with grace, purpose, and independence. You are not just a parent. You are a person with depth, wisdom, and stories still unfolding. So take these truths with you. Stand tall, live fully, and know that the respect you seek doesn't come from being louder. It comes from being grounded. If this message spoke to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. We're here to share more insights that uplift, empower, and remind you just how much you still matter. Your journey isn't over. It's entering a wiser, more powerful chapter.